This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. And this is Sheryl Vecchio, and today's class is listing contracts and the associated documentation. So what I want to do is we're going to go through these documents in PAR. And the reason we have this class, you guys, it's twofold. One, it's a lot of it is repeat from things you learn, things you actually learned when you went to real estate school about contracts, right? And a lot of it is to help you understand how to put documents together so that when you go to a listing presentation, you know what you're talking about. The most important thing you can learn in this business is how to counsel your client. If you want to win business, you have all the tools you need here to really outshine your competition by just knowing what you're talking about, okay? And sharing that information with your client. Also, the state of Texas has introduced 3 hours of contract training to renew your license as CE credit, a mandatory CE credit to renew your license, because the state of Texas thought, well, maybe, you know, it looks like that agents have forgotten a lot of what they've learned, or they're not applying it, or the rules changed since they learned it. So I encourage you, as you go through your career, to go back and reread these contracts. We've talked about that before. Reread these, learn them, understand them. And Michael Hughes has a fantastic series called Contract Mastery that I recommend you attend. If you can't make the class in person, then please go to YouTube, and he does a great job of recording all those classes and putting them on the Abbey Realty YouTube channel. Just to give you an example, he has an 1 and 40-minute class on the water district notice. Now, we discuss that in here, but we don't spend an 1 and 40 minutes on it. So, I mean, he really deep dives into contract mastery, and you'll be the smartest agent in the room if you'll just simply take advantage of that. Very few brokerages offer that opportunity for free. And my favorite part is they're all recorded, and I go back to them myself. I've never sat in his class and didn't either he remind me of something or I learned something new. Hello. So I highly recommend that. Now, before I go to a listing presentation, you guys, in my perfect world, remember, I think we talked a little bit about this last week. In my perfect world, when I have a listing presentation, I schedule it at least 1 day ahead of time. Like, in my perfect world, if someone said to me, Sheryl, I'd like to talk to you about selling my house, I'm thinking about selling my house, I would schedule that tomorrow. And I'll tell you why. Because what I do is I tell them, oh, that's great. I tell you what, let's set up some time tomorrow and I can come over and I will, we can talk about, you know, your real estate goals, your house, your home's value, and this whole process. And I tell them it takes about an hour. And I explain to them that I'm going to walk through your house. I'd like a tour of your house. And then I will bring information about comps. We'll talk about your home's value and the process of selling your house. So I've told them what to expect. And I'll also tell them, and by the way, I'm going to drop off some material for you to review before our meeting. And here's kind of, this is an example of what I've, here lately I've modified this a little bit. I think our folders are a little bit different, but this is pretty much what they get. First of all, I give them a nice bound CMA. So they have a CMA, and if there's anything I really want them to pay attention to, I might put a little sticky in it somewhere as a note, but I give them, I do a CMA and I bind it. These little things cost me like $10 for 12 of them, and they work pretty well. One of these days I'm going to up my game and get a better binding system, but this works pretty well. And then they get a folder. And in the folder, I put all of the documents I'm going to review with them, all the listing documents, so that they can review them, okay? I put the IABS in front. I've got all of their information about wire fraud and, you know, their TILA, their exclusions, everything that they need. And then I put I put the information about me. I have my little, things about my client ratings. And then I have some bifolds that I put together for my business. And then I put the Abby Realty story in there. If I have some tchotchkes or pins or something. And then I have a letter in here that tells them again what I'm going to be doing, what our agenda is. That way I've set the expectation for my meeting. I drop this off in an envelope at their front door, and I ask them to have it available during our meeting. So I've already sent them everything that they need to know. I personally think it's easier to get through that hour if they've seen it before I get there, okay? So, and if I don't know them, I go early and I case the neighborhood before, I get there. So I really love having that time. Now, if someone says to me, Sheryl, I really want you to sell my house, can you be here this afternoon? I'm not going to say no. I need to get, I'm not going to get weird about this process. But this is if everything was perfect. Well, y'all know how often that happens. So that's how I get ready for this. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
A lot of realtors
I send this to my client. There's a lot of ways to do this, and I've seen some really slick presentations where someone does a bomb video, and they have a video that they send that client, and they go through all the paperwork, all the documents. I mean, I probably want to put that on my wish list repertoire of things to do. But I have found that delivering paper there, that we can sit at the kitchen table and I'm not worried about my internet connection. I found having that ahead of time is very helpful. So I'm not against the digital part, but you're going to have something to talk through when you're there. So, and if you have like a great tablet that you can, show them a presentation and go through that digitally, then I think that's excellent. And but my tablet's kind of smaller, so and I think also situational. Like if I'm, my brother's an IT, geek, so he would love the digital version. Whereas I have a client now that won't even text me. Everything has to be done by phone or in person, and God's testing me on that, by the way. It's an awesome opportunity. Sure. Okay, so let me get back to mine. So let's go through, I'm going to go through our listing docs. And by the way, I think we talked last time that about before I even start my listing docs, what I do is I go to HAR and I pull any old MLS listings, like the most recent MLS listing, and I save that, and I save their tax information, okay? Because I'm going to need those two things. So I create a file. I have a cloud, like it's not DocuSign, but it's Nextcloud, and so I keep all that in, make a folder for each client. Let me get to there it is. So I've done all my forms. I mean, I've got my tax information. I've got the old MLS. I usually ask my clients to see a copy of their license so I can get their names, make sure their names on their license matches their, what I see on the tax rolls. But if it's not appropriate, I mean, if I don't know them, right, they're going to be weird if I ask them for a copy of their license and we've never met. So I would skip that part. So you're just going to have to kind of go with your flow about what works for this client. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to talk a little bit about the IABS. And I know we understand this form, but when I sit down with my clients and I present this form to them, I explain agency relationship to them. There's a couple things that I want to bring up in this class that I think are important for you to remember. One is, in the state of Texas, that this is the association of the brokerage and your client, okay? So it talks to your client on the broker's level and explains the broker's minimum responsibilities: be nice to everyone, be fair, be truthful. That's the minimum responsibilities. But what I want to bring up is that as an agent, you are either represent a seller or a buyer, or you're a sub-agent, or you're an intermediary. And be careful about when you're an intermediary. Today we're talking about listings. So when you represent a seller, they are the primary client in a transaction. So let's say you're representing a seller and you bring a buyer, but you don't have a buyer's rep agreement with the buyer. Then you are really a sub-agent for the buyer and you represent the seller. You're a sub-agent for the seller and you represent the seller. So in that case, you're not an intermediary between the buyer and the seller. Does that make sense? If you have a buyer's rep agreement with the buyer and you choose to act as an intermediary, then I'm going to be honest with you guys. That's not my favorite place to be. I avoid that one at all costs. I have agreed to do it once, and I still didn't think, I don't think I'd do it again. And in the case I agreed to do it, my neighbors showed up on my driveway and they said, I'm going to buy his condo at the lake. This is what I'm going to pay for it. And this is what we've agreed on. We're not going to have an inspection. Would you write up the paperwork so we can do it? And so in that case, I need a listing and I need a buyer's rep agreement. If I don't have the buyer's rep agreement, then I am not an intermediary. Does that make sense? If you represent the seller and you have a buyer, I personally have someone in my life, my daughter's an agent, so I'll call her up and say, hey, I've got a client that wants to make an offer on one of my listings. Would you rep her in this transaction? And she's going to be calling you. And then my daughter will give me a transaction. Give me a referral fee. And I trust my daughter to take good care of my client. Okay. So in that case, Frank Gray, the brokerage is still an intermediary and you still need that signed, but I am not an intermediary. I still represent my seller. And then the last thing I want to say on this is, you cannot choose who you represent. If you have a listing agreement in place, you can't say in this transaction, I'm going to represent the buyer and I'll get my daughter to represent, because that listing agreement is the primary controlling contract here. So does that make sense? Okay, so that was, anything more on this that y'all are not clear on? Because we're going to move on to the fun part. So, and we did a little bit of work on this. However, we're going to do it again in case someone was not here on last Wednesday. So for your seller, remember your seller's names have to match the tax records. So on this, for the seller, you're going to put the legal name of the homeowner found on the tax records. And if they're using another name, the seller must have supporting documents. So for instance, if you see Test Bob and Test Betty on the tax records, but you only have Test Bob, what happened to Test Betty? We need to have this conversation. All right. So make sure before you go that you understand relationships and you can have that conversation with your clients. I just, it's a valid conversation. I just have that conversation that says, when I looked up your home on the tax rolls, this is the ownership that it says. Where's Test Bob? You know, he might have died, and we have documentation for that most likely. Or we might be divorced, and in the divorce decree, one or the other gets the house. And that's when you can say, okay, I have documentation that I can change the seller and use only one name or the other. When you add the address here, this is not the property address, this is the address where they reside. And then you want to make sure that you put lot and block and then legal description and then the property address. You catch up with myself. So that's, you know, who is listing the house, information about you, information about the property. And then I want to talk a little bit about improvements and accessories. And what you really want to understand, and when I go into a listing, I'm scanning. Like when I do that initial tour of the house, that's why I want to do it first. You need to be scanning. Do you see cameras? Do you see like a big giant grandma chandelier in the breakfast room that didn't come with the house? You know, is there a ringing doorbell? Are there, you know, things that should have remotes, that kind of thing? Because you need to help your client with this process. And we talk about improvements and think about what we've expanded, what the definition of improvements and accessories is. So it's what you think. It's the appliances, the balances above the windows, like the fabric. If there's anything like fabric or balances above the windows, screens, shutters, awnings, wall-to-wall carpet, mirrors, ceiling fans, attic fans, mailboxes, all of that stays unless we tell somebody, unless someone says something. You guys, the worst transaction I was ever involved with is I represented the buyer and the seller decided that the spa attached to the house that had the same siding as the house had was theirs and took it last minute. Like there was a gaping hole on the side of the house and, you know, here where they took the spa and they had to bring it back and have it reinstalled. That was fun. So any mounts, be careful about television mounts, TVs that are mounted on the wall, because you kind of have to help your client walk through this. Also, just a little bit about accessories that are attached to the house. Make sure if you're seeing cameras, if you see things like, what do you call, oh goodness, solar panels on the top of the house, any kind of Ring doorbells, any kind of accessory that would have software attached to it, that software goes with the house. Passwords, logins for that software. If the Ring doorbell stays, the Ring doorbell app stays. Does that make sense? So I'm just kind of going through that in my head as I'm walking through the house to make sure that I address that with my client. And that brings us to exclusions. Most of the time I put C list here. Since I had the hot tub extravaganza, and the seller says, well, I didn't understand. I just thought it was mine. I put it in there. It didn't come with the house. I was going to take it. So I have my sellers take that exclusion list and draw a line through it and sign it. You know, or just if they're going to electronically sign it, just leave it blank and sign it. Because when you have that seller really spend time with that and sign it, then I've had so many times where they say, no, I don't have, everything stays. I don't have any exclusions, everything stays. But when they start looking at that list, then they'll say, well, that is grandma's chandelier. I do want to take that. You know, they'll start thinking through, oh, well, I do have my Ring doorbell. You know, that was a Christmas gift. I want that. So it helps them kind of think through that. So, and when I go to a listing presentation, most of the time, unless it's, you know, my family member, we've already talked about the price and when we're going to start and all those kinds of things. Well, then I usually go there and leave listing price blank. What I For me personally, I avoid telling people your house is worth $199,990. You know, I avoid that, okay? What I try to do is take a CMA with me. I provide the CMA, which is a TREC rule, by the way, to provide a CMA. No matter what kind of discussions you have, you got to show them the document and you've got to upload it into Back Agent. But I like to show them a CMA that says the houses in your area, like homes, have sold between price A and price B. Price A being, you know, not well cared for, whatever the lowest price is, no pool, whatever. And then this is fully updated, brand new kitchen, blah, 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 whatever that is. I explain that to my client. This is what the low end of the spectrum in your neighborhood looks like. This is what the high end of your neighborhood looks like. Where do you think your house falls? And I want them to tell me the price. Now, you're going to get this answer. Well, what do you think it's worth? For me personally, I love to keep my clients in the middle of the comps, you know, middle high of the comps. Now, I mean, if I'm looking, it looks like Joanna Gaines just came through the house and, you know, then of course I'm going to have a different story. But for appraisal purposes in this market, I really like being in the comps if I can talk my client into that. And I have a long conversation with my client about the issues around overpricing your house. If I make, and I explain it to him like this, if I make a mistake pricing your house, I'd rather underprice it than overprice it. Because if I make a mistake in underpricing it, the market is going to fix it. You'll get multiple offers. People will offer you more than you're asking, and the market will fix itself. If I make a mistake overpricing your house, you won't get the attention that you need. You won't, your buyer won't see your house because it's priced out of their price range. So it's much harder to lower a price than it is to price it correctly in the beginning. So I try to talk with people because, you know, what you're going to hear is, well, Bob down the street got 500,000. I want what Bob got. My house is as good as Bob's. I'm out here mowing it every week. Bob never mows his grass. I want 500,000 for my house, just like Bob. You're going to need to walk through those conversations with people. But I leave that blank and I try to get them to come to the price. Remember, my job is to do what my client wants me to do. So if my client insists that their house is worth 500,000, I try this. I say, okay, well, my job is to do whatever you know, is to represent you. So if you would like to put your house on the market for 500,000, let's do this. Can we agree to watch your online traffic and to watch your traffic for the first 2 weeks? And then if we don't get the traffic that we want or we don't have an offer, then let's readjust. Is that okay with you? So that's how I can handle that. Questions about pricing? Okay, so the terms, for terms, when I go to my listing appointment, I leave this as blank. In fact, this just changed very recently. The rules around this just changed. In the past, this, and by the way, I haven't changed this yet, so I apologize. Up until last week, you could only have a home on the market for, it's coming soon, for 14 days. That has changed to 21 days. Thank you. I'm more excited about that than anything. So the rule, here's the rule. The rule is that you can market a home for 1 day, publicly market it before it is listed as coming soon or active in MLS. Now, what's publicly marketed? If I go to a house and I start shooting pictures and I put on my Facebook, oh, coming soon, I'm so excited about my new listing, we'll have it on the market in a few weeks, seller's just doing some updates, you know, and I put that on my social media, that's publicly marketing. So the definition of publicly marketing is really you publicly talking about having this listing. And you can do that for 1 day prior to it being a coming soon in MLS. So I leave this blank because I have no idea how long, what the seller is talking about in terms of how long it's going to take them to get their house ready to go live. Once you put the property in coming soon in MLS, then you have 21 days now, not 14. Pardon, don't look at my thing. I need to update it. So you have 21 days to make it go live. All right. If you do nothing in the 21 days, it automatically goes live. And then if you're not ready, you need to put it in withdrawn. So up until this last week, it would go automatically into withdrawn, but now it goes automatically into live. After 21 days of being coming soon, MLS will just make it live. And then you guys, you know, we can talk about, and then there's a rule about pictures, right? You have to have at least 7 pictures within, I want to say within 3 to 5 days. I'll double check on our break. So you have to have pictures. So you want to be careful. You're thinking of timing in your head. You walk up to a house and it's a pack of hoarders. You might not be able to make your listing go live today. Your listing start today. You can market your listing as of this date. 4A, the listing begins on blank. That's when you can start marketing. So if I go to a listing appointment today and I'm looking around, and in my business, I have a stager partner. Stellar Staging is my staging partner, and they go to my listings and walk with my client and help them prep the house to sell. So I've got to get my stager out there. We've got it, you know, depending on what I'm looking at, what it's going to take for me to get that house ready before I can make it go live. That's when you need to be careful about when the listing begins. I personally think 21 days is perfect. You don't know how happy I was when they changed that to 21 days. Because in most cases, it takes at least 2 weeks for me to get a stager out there, for me to get my photographer out there, for them to get all of their closets, you know, organized and everything. We all live in our houses. So, you know, the garage, but you want to get the garage cleaned out. So I leave that blank, and then we talk about those dates when I'm sitting there. If they're normal, if everything is like, they pretty much take care of things, I think you could start your listing and be ready in 21 days, easy. But if they say, well, I wanted to talk to you about this today, but I really don't want to put my house on the market till like mid-September, then you need to back in 21 days, and that's when your listing starts. Does that make sense? So, and you know, I have a client, you can sign it today, but that date, it says this listing begins on whatever date. So let's say, for ease of doing, you know, math, that they don't want to, I go to talk to someone today and they don't want to put their house on the market till the 21st of September. The first date I can have on here is the 1st of September. So that's what I'm needing. Right, it's got to be within the 21-day window. So you need to back into that date. Okay. So now let's talk about broker's compensation. The most important thing I can tell you about broker's compensation is not what? It's not set. All compensation is negotiable. Be really careful about your language when you talk about your compensation. We don't want to use terms like, well, 6% is normal. We always do 6%. It would be a safer bet for you to say something like, commonly, I charge a service fee of 6%. All right, if that's what you charge. But be very careful about language that sounds like it's a set fee. at our brokerage or with you, right? Fees are negotiable. I tell my clients commonly, a seller pays 6% in commission. I commonly charge a service fee of 3%, and I allow the buyer's agent 3%, and the seller pays that. And by the way, that's, you know, nationally, that's changing a lot. I don't know if you guys have read some of the things that have come out with the crazy market. I have a client, they are moving to North Carolina. They are from Brazil. So all of this is like crazy land to them anyway. And they're having trouble coming up with the fact that, making it sound logical to them, that they're going to pay the buyer and the seller's agent commission here in Texas. In North Carolina, it's a common practice that the buyer pays for the buyer's agent commission. And they'll have to pay 2.5% to their buyer's agent, because it's just unusual with the crazy market in the Greensboro, which is where they're moving, that it's just a negotiable point. And they've negotiated out to, hey, you want it, buyer, you can pay it, or I'm not going to sell to you. I'll sell to one of the other people that'll pay it. So it's negotiable. If you're going to choose 5A2, that's to be used when you charge a flat fee for service. For instance, the two guys in my driveway, I just charge them a flat fee to do the paperwork for them. Yes. Yes, I don't recommend that in our market, but yes. But let's say, for instance, a good example would be, a lot of times I'll take, in fact, if most of the time, if you're going to move, if you're my client and you're going to move somewhere in the greater Houston area, I take a buyer's rep agreement with me, and I leave this blank, and I offer you a discount on my normal fee if you'll sign a buyer's rep agreement with me. And it works really well with people that don't know me well, and they didn't talk to me about helping them with their buying their home. You know, sometimes people will get weird. They'll say, well, I want you to help me list my house because my cousin's an agent and I don't want them to know my business, but I'm going to let them help me find a house. And they'll come up with crazy land stuff. So I take a buyer's rep agreement with me all filled out, but I take this and it's blank, and I'll offer them a little discount by signing the buyer's rep agreement with me. So I'll put 5.5 in there because I offered 0.5% or whatever, you know, like there's a house across the street from me that I'm really thinking I'm getting the listing, but my neighbor's also an agent. So that client doesn't know it, don't tell them, but I would almost pay them to get that listing, okay? So I will discount that to the point I need to get that listing. It's right across the street from me and across the street from the other agent. It's okay to have something written on there. It's okay for you to have an expectation of what you feel like your services are worth. But it's also okay for the client to negotiate that. Well, you know what? I'm going to be really honest with you. You can, and I see this in MLS a lot, by the way, where a listing agent is discounting the buyer's agent's fee also. I highly recommend you don't do that. When I negotiate a discount, I'm negotiating a discount on my fee. The buyer's agent's not there. They didn't get a chance to negotiate their fee. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And buyer's agents, I mean, think about it. They go look in MLS, and I recommend you guys do this too. Know if you're a buyer's agent, we'll talk about this tomorrow, know what you make. You need to understand what you're going to be making in showing this house. The MLS is the contract. So what is written in MLS as the buyer's agent's fee is the contract. But can as a seller say, I'm not paying 3% for a buyer's agent, they can, but I highly recommend they don't. So if I discount, for me personally, if I were to discount my fee, I would discount my fee, not someone I don't know's fee. And they didn't agree to share my discount with me, but if I was going to do something for a flat fee, I would choose 5A2. Now you guys, this isn't the Sheryl reads the contract to you class, because I know y'all can read, but I do want to point out some things that are important to understand. Under 5B, the definition of earn is basically, it says compensations earned when the seller or the broker brings a buyer or the seller is in breach of contract. That's what earned means. That's when you earn your compensation. It's payable. The compensation's payable at closing if the seller refuses to sell after the broker's compensation has been earned, okay? Or the seller breaches the listing. So this is saying that once you earn your compensation, which means you or the seller brings a buyer, okay? Or the seller is in breach of contract. It's payable at closing, or if the seller refuses to sell after the broker's compensation has been earned. So for some reason, you get to closing and the seller goes, never mind, I'm not selling. I don't want to sell. They really owe you compensation at that time. Compensation is not payable if the seller failure was not their fault, or if it was a foreclosure. So if something happened, or a casualty loss, that means if the house caught on fire and they couldn't close, they still don't owe you compensation, okay? Under D, it talks about breach of by buyer under a contract, and that is the broker is entitled to share. What this talks about is if a buyer leaves, okay, and if there are damages or monies paid, like earnest money and that type of thing, and the buyer breaches the contract, the broker is entitled to share the earnest money. It's the sale price or damages by suit or settlement or any monies earned. The broker, didn't say the agent, by the way, the broker is entitled to share in that. So when earnest money is, like, let's say the earnest money on a contract was $3,000, and the buyer breaches the contract and the earnest money and the buyer doesn't get the earnest money back, that whole $3,000 doesn't auto go to the seller. All right. And by the way, like if a title company or a lender sent out a surveyor or an appraiser and they prepaid for that, well, those monies will come out of that earnest money. But also the broker is entitled to some of that money. The title company should manage it. And then if there was, of course, any type of lawsuit, then, you know, attorneys and a judge would, but the title company should manage that. So, and the title company can take their money out first. So with respect to service providers under 2, you're entitled to referral fees from service providers. So, you know, like we have, what is it? Reliant gives us a referral fee if we refer to them. Well, this is covering that there. Under 3, other fees and reimbursable expenses. If you are charging an additional fee for service, a good example is some agents are also stagers, and they'll charge an additional fee for staging that's outside of their service fee as an agent. That would go under number 3. So I don't know if that applies to anybody in here, but if you know, and by the way, a lot of agents do a very good job of offering tiered services too. So that's something to think. I've thought about this. I have not initiated it because it will take some thought and work. Who does that very well here is Annie B. If y'all, I think John's on the line, but she does a very good job of offering tiered services. She is a interior designer, and so she has additional services that she provides, and provides a tiered service. For 4% you get this, for 3% you get this, and then for 2%, I don't know what her tiers are, I haven't seen them. Statistically, if you give people 4 choices, they will choose the second to the highest. So whatever, just a little inside, information, that if you were to give someone 4 choices for 4 tiers, most likely they're going to choose the second to the highest. So that would be your sweet spot of where you would want people to choose. I give it for free. Yes. Yes. Additional whatever. I've seen this a couple ways. In fact, I used to have a transaction coordination business, and I had a client that was also an interior designer and stager. But it was interesting. She even put my fee. She would put admin fee and put my fee in there. I don't know how she got away with that in that market, because it wasn't our seller's market like it is now. But she had people that paid it, and she would put my transaction fee in there. It was kind of interesting. Pardon me? Yes, I did. And you know what? I have to tell you, you should talk. Teresa Lutz, and she's an Abbey agent. She also owns Stellar Staging. That's depending on what size house, $200 to $250 is the best money I ever spent. It's called a walk and talk, and she walks through the house with them and talks to them about what they need to pack up, what they need to put up. She talks to them about, any personal things they need to put up, family pictures, religious items, how to deal with those. Some religions have a prayer closet or something in their home, and how to continue to do that and honor your beliefs, but also not have those things out. And so she walks through the house with them, tells them what to pack up, what they need to fix. Best money I've ever spent. And I explained that they think that I gave them something for free, and I don't have to tell them, no, you got to get rid of Jesus, Joseph, and Mary before I got even to the front door. They got to go. And so I don't have to do that. And then it's just a great service. I mean, I think so. I think she does. Teresa Lutz, Lutz, and her business is Stellar Staging. And I think there's a couple other ones too that do work here, but I have to tell you, it's just the best money I ever spent. And I market it, free staging consultation. So, okay, so protection period. Let's talk about protection periods. Let's say you want to fire me. And by the way, I tell my clients, if you want to fire me, then you get to fire me anytime you want. I don't want people to work with me if they don't want to work with me. I've never been fired, but I like to, let them know that they want to fire me, they can. If for some reason your listing ends for whatever reason, before you get the house sold, the house isn't sold yet, your listing has ended, either your clients maybe they've decided not to sell. Never mind, I don't want to sell. Okay. So this means that for whatever period of time you put in here, I usually do 60, I've seen this done at 30. It means that you're entitled to compensation during the protection period if a list of potential buyers is provided and the property is not listed by another agent. That's what all 1, 2, 3, all that means. So within 10 days of your listing ending, you will need to I give I would give that seller all the names of anyone that saw it online, anyone that came to an open house, everyone that could be a potential buyer that you know of to that seller. And if they don't sign another listing agreement with another agent, if they decide to sell to one of those people, you are protected. That's what this means. So I think this would probably come up in the situation where a seller decides not to sell. Never mind, I can't sell. I didn't get that job in Wisconsin, so I'm not moving, blah, blah, blah. And then one of the people that came and saw the house during your the time you had it listed knocks on the door and says, hey, I saw the sign's gone. I really wanted to buy this house. And if that seller said, okay, well, then you are protected. If your listing ends and then the listing they choose another agent and they sign another listing agreement, then you're not compensated at that point. It's under a listing agreement with another agent. Does that make sense? Okay. Make sure you provide the list within 10 days. Under F, 5F, the county that you're getting paid in, which funds are being issued, you can select more than one county. So we've talked about this before. I do business mostly in Montgomery County. So most of these say Montgomery, Harris County. Every once in a while, I'll sell in Huntsville. And then I'd say Walker, Montgomery County. I try to do what makes most sense where we're going to close. It's not about where the house sits. It's about where we're going to close. So if your favorite title company sits in Harris County, you need to make sure Harris County's on. Going down a little bit, I want to talk in number 6, just a few things regarding public marketing. And, you know, notice this is in bold letters, not as much for you, but so that your client understands it. If you're advertising coming soon property, this needs to be an MLS within 1 day. And this talks to your client about what public marketing is. Their house is going to be on MLS. Includes, but it's not limited to flyers, yard signs, digital marketing, public-facing websites, brokerage websites, IDX and VOWs, which is like anything that has to do with like Zillow and Redfin and all that. Email blast, postcards, anything like that. That's public marketing. So here's where you choose what you're going to do. So you can choose under 6A, you can choose 1A or B. So under 1, the broker will file this listing with one or more multiple listing services according to the following. This is where you check which you're going to do. If you choose A, the house needs to be live in MLS in 5 days. I've never accomplished that, ever accomplished it, because I have to get a photographer out. The stager's got to be out there. The photographer's got to be out there. They've got to pack up all their stuff. So, and how I tell my clients, if you don't need it in the next 60 days, let's pack it. Let's get it out of here, because nothing makes a closet look bigger than half of your stuff being gone. So, you know, I need to give them time to do that. Now, this says max 14 days because the rule just changed, but now it's a max of 21 days. So I'm going to choose B. Back to our first example. My client wants to put their house on the market September 21st. My listing agreement starts the 1st of September. That's the date that's on my listing agreement. And then in here, I choose B and I put 21 days. Does that make sense? And then I put something like prepare home for sale, you know, whatever they're doing, pack up the house, whatever. Usually it's prepare home for sale. So, questions? I try to, you know, it depends on their situation. like, for instance, I have a client now, she's got a pod in her front driveway because she is moving out of state to an apartment that's much smaller than her house, where she's going to live for 6 months until her house is built. And some of her stuff is going to a storage until her new home is built, and some of it's going to the apartment with her. So I love the pod idea, but be very careful with pods, because I think the change in the 14-day and 21-day was just for me to answer my prayers, because they put the pod in the front yard. I put my sign up, and on the pod's agreement, it said they need 5 days to notice to pick up the pod. So we were way within the 5 days. I said, call them and tell them you're going to pick it up on this day so we can have our pictures on this day, keeping in my 14 days. The pod people can't get to it until my 14th day on the old contract. So on the 14th day. So I was just going to have to let it go to withdrawn. I mean, I was like, I can't get my pictures out here. I've got a pod in the front yard. I can't take pictures of the pod. So, and then the next day, the 21-day rule came out, so I could update my listing agreement to say 21 days, and I would be compliant. But I thought I was going to have to either go get my sign, take it all down, or let it go to withdrawn, and neither one sounded good to me. So I know they answered my prayer with that. It was all about me. I could tell. So, but so if, and by the way, if they can't make the 21 days, I've had to go get my sign. The neighbors think you were fired. It was terrible. So really get these dates down with your client. Couple of things I want to talk about in notice regarding MLS rules. So we tell the seller that you're required to update MLS with all information, because some people want to be secret about this. And this is explaining to them that you have to update all information in MLS, and it is public information to anyone that has access to MLS. Also, the seller can choose not to file with MLS, but we tell them what that means, that you can't market their home. I mean, think about what I don't know how they would sell their house under these rules, quite frankly, because there used to be a thing called pocket listings, and all of these rules are really designed to keep us from having pocket listings, because they're really not good for your client. They're not in your client's best interest. But now we can't market our houses. So this is a notice to seller that you may not market the property not filed with MLS, and the listing will not be visible under any other search engines. So it won't be visible to Zillow, it won't be visible anywhere. Also under B, it's seller grants the broker a license to own and use and share information and images of the listing. So this is where we define what the listing is, and then we define that the brokerage owns all the information on the listing and the images and the pictures, okay? They do not own the pictures. Under 7, we talk about authorized access and authorized normal business access to the property, as well as duplication of keys. Also, it talks about scheduling companies. Currently, we use Showing Time, so we put Showing Time there. Have you guys used Showing Time and logged into your Showing Time? Talks about key boxes. Personally, I'm a fan of supers. I think they're much safer, but a regular key box, if you don't have a super. Someone told me that there's a shortage of supers if you want to buy. Is there? They let you buy just one? I better go buy one. It explains the risks and rewards of key boxes and supers. This is a great time in your presentation when I kind of skim over this and tell my client what they're signing, and I talk to them about access to their house. This is a great time to stop and say, this is how people will access your house. We're going to list your house on a showing service called Showing Time. what number, which of you is going to authorize showings? Okay, if you've got multiple people here, if one of the other client travels for work and they're in business meetings all the time, you hopefully want to talk the other person into being the authorizing person with that showing service. So when you set up the showing service, they will get a text that says, you know, would you like to confirm or decline this request for a showing? I tell my clients, if you're going to decline, please shoot me a text and tell me what you want me to tell that agent. They're going to call me, because it doesn't have a space to say, you know, this instead of that. So if you can't let them in at noon, but 1 o'clock works better, let me know so I can tell them what to do. This is a great time to talk about things about, you know, people are going to be coming in your house. And we talk to our clients about safety. Do they have any firearms in the house? We want to know that. Are they secure? They need to be secure. You guys, when you have clients that have that big butcher block of knives, you know, like the Ginsu set sitting out on the counter, safety, have them put that up. Or sometimes ladies will like to set the table. All the little forks and knives and everything need to be put up. Let's not leave things like that out that could be used as a weapon. Talk to them about their prescription drugs. Talk to them about grandma's jewelry. I tell my clients, I've never had a problem, but this is just basic safety rules and basic, you know, rules of engagement. And I explain to my client that, you know, when a buyer's agent comes in your house, they're not going to follow a client into your closet. That's just dangerous. So, or most probably your bathroom. So keep all of that up. So it's a good time when I go through this to explain that to my client. But I explain to them about the lockbox. I explain that they're authorizing that. Tenants, if a tenant is in place, they need to give written authorization for a key box or super, and there is a form for that. In fact, it's called tenant's authorization for key box placement, okay? Under liability, this releases us and the broker of all liability for personal injury and property damage while the house is being shown. Number 8 is for the other agent. Remember we talked about the buyer's agent? That's number 8. So under number 8, you're going to put 3% for MLS participant. I put 3% for both. Non-MLS participant means that they're a broker, they have their license, but for whatever reason they don't have access to our MLS. So, and some people give them less of a commission because you have to do some work for them. They have no access to MLS. You have to show them what's on it. I think that is the worst idea ever, because if you really look at your role as a buyer's agent, is that you need to be qualified to sell that property, and that means having intimate knowledge of that area of property. And to me, if you're not an MLS member, you don't have access to all of the information for your client. I don't know how you could fairly represent them. So I don't try that. That's how I know I have to get something referred out. I don't have access to the MLS. I don't understand that area. It's beyond my expertise. Then I refer that out to another client. But technically, I could do it. Technically, I could do it. Again, it's another opportunity for us to talk about intermediary status. We provide the seller with an explanation of that status, and we provide them, they can choose to say no intermediary status, but we need to explain to them that that means that there are 450 agents now that cannot sell this house, that cannot bring their client to this house if you say no intermediary status. And it talks about what that means in bold letters so that we can give that information to our client. If that we act as an intermediary, this is the broker and the broker's associate's role. And you know, I think it's a great selling point to explain to my clients that I try not to represent both sides. If I have a buyer that wants to see your house, then I get a trusted peer to show that buyer, so that I don't have any conflict of interest. And it's kind of a nice conversation. You know, I agreed to represent you. That's why I'm here. I'm agreeing to represent you. So that's how I handle that conversation. They think I'm being really nice to them. Special. They're special. Be careful about confidential information. Be careful not to disclose information regarding the sale of other properties by other clients. This comes to play, and I had a gotcha one time. I got a listing by sending out postcards around a listing that I had. So I had just sold the neighbor's house, like catty-cornered across the street. And these people on my postcard, they called me. And I'm sitting in the listing appointment, and of course, the house that I sold is on the comps. And what it sold for is on the comps. And we're talking about the houses that sold. And the guy asked me, he goes, so did Jimmy tell you he wanted to sell the house quickly? Is that why he sold at that price? And I had to stop myself. I almost answered him without, that's not something I can talk to him about. And I just had to tell him, well, you know, I can't talk about that, but I can tell you that they were happy with the price that they sold it, is how I just left it. But be careful not to give information about the neighbors, especially if you're successful in getting business from business, because they all want to know about you. Remember, I want what Bob got. I want to know how Bob got that. Under broker's authority, it talks about broker's authority. It talks about reasonable effort to act diligently to market the property, procure a buyer, and negotiate to sell the property. It talks what we're to do. It gives the seller an opportunity to say that they don't want the listing to be displayed on the internet, and they do not want the address of the property to be displayed on the internet. We do not know how we're going to market the house with that when they do that. So I've never had anyone do that. Remember, it gives them a notice that if they check 11B, consumers who conduct searches for listings on the internet won't see their information. So they tell them you're going to be the secret seller. Be careful when filling out 11C. Make sure that if you have a house priced above, right now FHA is $356,362. That sometimes changes. That's the cap on an FHA loan. So if you're selling something over that price, you don't check FHA. VA no longer has a cap on it. And cash is always king. D authorizes us to advertise and disclose information, photography, audio, visual images, all that kind of stuff. And then 12 talks about the seller's representation. The seller represents that, you know, they have title to the house, that there are no liens against it, that they're not in foreclosure, that their mortgage is current. And then this lists out additional seller's responsibilities. And if you look at the seller's responsibilities, it talks about they agree to cooperate, they agree not to rent or lease the property, they agree not to negotiate with prospective buyers. This becomes really important in this market. You guys, if you have a hot property that's really priced well, in this market, sometimes people will show up on your client's front door. I mean, I found, especially houses under 300,000 in my area, which is like, they're rare. Oh my goodness, I had one client that she couldn't get him out of her front yard. It was crazy. So, I mean, we sold the house in a weekend, but it was a painful weekend for her. So just have your client understand that if someone knocks on their door, just to send them back to you. And they'll try to be nice to them. My client was so sweet, and this older couple showed up, and they really wanted the house. And I mean, she, you know, in her mind, she would be rude to them not to have that discussion with them. So you need to have that discussion with your client. And again, 14 talks about limited limitation of liability. And this talks a lot about, you know, what you're not capable of doing and what you're not responsible for. Like, for instance, you're not responsible for other brokers or associates, inspectors, appraisers, and contractors who are authorized to access the property. Under 15, under special provisions, I find very little reason to use special provisions, but if you do, it A, must be factual, so only the facts, and B, it must be something not covered by using an existing form. There are very few reasons I can think of that would be under special provisions. I haven't thought of one on a listing special provision. If you come up with one, let me know. It can be my example. This talks about default, mediation, attorney's fees, all the good attorney things. Under number 19, under addenda and other documents, select all that apply, and all checked need to be uploaded into Back Agent. All right, signed and uploaded into Back Agent. And that's for number 21. It tells it's all the additional notices. The broker's fees aren't fixed, they're negotiable. It's a fair housing notice, it's lead-based paint, and additional notices to review by the seller. This kind of gets you out of jail because you're going to have people that, here's where you get in trouble on listings, most commonly, I think. I had this happen to me. Lived in her house for 25 years. Loved all of her neighbors. I just want to find someone that's going to fit in and my neighbors are going to love. I mean, that's scary. That, like, to me, that screams, how can I get in trouble with fair housing laws? So be very careful about conversations with your listing agent, with your sellers. Oh, my friend, there's a little old couple that came up to, oh, everyone in the neighborhood will love them. I want them. Well, we don't know, you know, I mean, that's just dangerous. So be very careful about what your client's understanding of fair housing laws are. That's why I send everyone to me. You guys, when I have multiple listings, I put it on an Excel spreadsheet, data on the Excel spreadsheet. The only thing personal I want to like consider, if I think one of my potential buyers is more credit worthy than another potential buyer, or one has cash when another one might, but we don't, when I share information about multiple offers with my listing client, I don't look for any other information than what I have on that contract and what I know about them as a financial risk. That's my job, okay? Okay, I think we did it. We signed everything. And what time is it? Oh, it's perfect. Okay. If you are not asleep yet, when we get back from break, we're going to talk about the notice to the notice of water district, of property in a water district. So let's take a 10-minute break. On my computer, it says 11:21. We're going to come back at 11:31. And you guys online, I'm going to put you on mute. Let me see. Jonathan, a quick question overview of what, as to what the question is. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't. I will keep up with the with what number I'm on. Thank you.
Sheryl, can you hear me?
Guys, I'm going to put you guys on mute, and we're going to be gone until 11:31. Hey guys, we have lunch served here in the room. So in a moment, our host for lunch is going to come and chat with us for a few minutes, but hang tight for just a few more minutes and we'll get started. I'm eating. So just full disclosure. Wish you were here. I'm on mute, you guys. I'm so sorry. Are you back? Okay. So very sorry. So what I was saying is that most people in our industry glaze over this document. They don't understand it, and I empathize because it's hard to understand. If you have not gone to Michael Hughes's class on the water district notice, he has a great recorded class that you can just go and listen to it, and I highly recommend that. I'm going to try to hit the highlights in here. The biggest highlight is that according to our state law, this document needs to be presented to a buyer prior to them making an offer. So this is one of the documents that I take to my listing appointment. I have my seller sign it, and then I upload it into the documents on MLS. And the reason I do that is because that means that I have done my job in presenting this document to all buyers before contract. Do not accept an offer. Do not execute an offer. Do not have your client sign an offer unless the buyer's agent has included this document signed by their buyer. All right? Because you're going to find in our industry that agents don't understand this. But if you do not present this document to a potential buyer prior to getting a contract, that buyer can get out of that contract at any time. That's how important it is. I can't stress that enough. And if you actually read through this, and I will agree, this one's a painful one. It's short and painful. How's that? Instead of short and painless. But if you see at the very top, it says this notice should be completed and given to prospective purchasers prior to execution of a binding contract of sale and purchase. Now, tomorrow, when we talk about being a buyer's agent, remember today we have our listing agent hat on. Tomorrow, when we talk about being a buyer's agent, we're going to have a whole different conversation about this document. But when today you're representing sellers, and you must have this in your documentation on your listing. In fact, while we're on that subject, I put everything in documents in a listing that buyer's agent's going to need to create and complete a contract. So I have for them the survey, the T47, everything I have in my possession that they're going to need to sign is all uploaded into MLS before I go live. And the way I ensure that is I get this all signed at my listing presentations or with my listing documentation. Not correct, Texas. It's a hard document, but it's really, hard produced this particular form, but there's really an evil twin sister in track, and yeah. So this is a Texas document. Okay, so in reading through this, what we need to make sure that we have is the name of the water district, the rate of tax, the amount of bonds authorized, and the amount of bonds issued. Just for a few, so we can get our vocabulary down. This really shouldn't be called a water district form. It should be called a statutory taxing authorities form. And in the state of Texas, by definition, when they say water district, they mean any taxing authority that provides water, sewage, drainage, or flood control. Okay, so think of that as that equals water district. That's kind of what you need to know, because what we've found, and this is going to make you the smartest agent in the room unless you're with other Abbey agents. and then y'all are all the smartest agents in the room, is because 99.5% of the agent population thinks that there is a water district and this is the water district form. That's not true in our area. We can have more than one taxing authority that falls under statutory taxing authority that provides water, sewage, flood control, or drainage, okay? So here in our area, the two best examples that we have is the Woodlands Township and the actual mud districts that are in that township. So the township provides drainage and flood control, so they're a statutory taxing authority under this rule. And then the local mud, the actual mud that provides water and sewage, is also a statutory taxing authority that provides those things. So in the Woodlands, you really need two of these documents, one for the township, one for the mud. Okay, another example is that in most of Harris County flood control is an entity, a statutory taxing entity that provides flood control. And within Harris County, there are people that get city water, so they wouldn't need a water district form for their water, but there are also MUDs in Harris County. And also MUDs are sometimes called public utility districts. And they're sometimes called water districts. They're not always called municipal utility districts, so be very careful about that. There is no one repository that I can show you that has all the answers. So this is a little bit of a secret agent kind of, you know, something that you need to take care of. So unfortunately, there's no real big place in the sky that gives you all this information, but I'll help you try to get through that and show you how we find this information. So we're going to need to find the name. If this property is in any type of statutory taxing authority that provides water, sewer, flood control, and drainage, all right? And AKA a water district, commonly called a water district, but not always. And then we need to find out if a standby fee would be applicable. A standby fee means that this property is in one of those districts, but it does not use the service. So most likely, if you were selling unimproved land, and there is a water district, but the land has no connection to it at all. Well, and not using the service, it's just totally unimproved land. Well, most entities have a standby fee. So if you're not selling unimproved land in this water district, then you would put NA there. But that's what a standby fee is. A standby fee means that I'm not using these services, but they exist where the property is, so that entity most likely has some sort of standby fee. And the standby fee is charged to the individual. It's not attached to the property. It's attached to the individual. Now, here are the other things that we have to know to fill this form out. If you look in section 3, and we're going to go back and fill the form out. So just hang on. Let's get all of our lingo straight, and then we're going to fill the form out. So notice that under number 3, we need to know a couple things. We need to know what a home rule or governing rule municipality is, okay? And that's usually found in the organizational documents. Governing rule means that it's whatever the legislative documents are for that state, a governing rule is governed by that. Home rule basically means they make their own rules, okay? And I think if I remember right from the class, I think there's like 1,250 something municipalities in the state of Texas, and 300 and something of them are home rule instead of governing rule. And we need to understand that, right? So And also we're going to know what an ETJ is. An extraterritorial jurisdiction is an ETJ, which means that the municipality that the ETJ is in can suck up that that area as part of their city. They can expand the boundaries of the city, of the municipality. So we're going to, well, you know, the most famous one was Kingwood. Kingwood was in an ETJ, and by the way, back in the day when Kingwood was annexed, it's annexation is what it is, and back in the day there was no vote that went on. You didn't have to. The community didn't elect to be part of the city of Houston. The city of Houston City Council voted to annex them, and if you were not in the city of Houston, oh my goodness, they called themselves the occupied city of Kingwood, I think, is what it was a big deal. Most of the people that lived in Kingwood did not want to be annexed. Now that area has to have an election to be annexed. That, I think 2019, that rule, they changed the rule where you just couldn't suck up a city, that they had to vote. But still, you could be against it and you lose the vote and you're annexed. And people need to know that. And by the way, since you can be annexed, then whatever, and if you're in an ETJ, you're not in the corporate boundaries of the city, so you don't elect the people that run the city, but you are subject to their decisions because you're in their ETJ. So that's why we have to tell people. And by the easiest way to figure out if a city is home rule or if they are governing rule is it says so normally in their city ordinance documents. So if you look up the city of Houston, say the city of Houston, a home rule community or home rule organization, municipality, it'll say it pretty much up to the top of that city's city ordinances. So we need to understand those things. So we understand ETJs, and we will understand home rule or governing rule municipalities. So now that we know all that, let's go back up to the top and let's say, okay, how do we fill out this silly form? So back to my story about if I'm going to, log myself back in. Before I ever start filling out my documents, remember I went to the tax rolls. And let me just go to the tax rolls. For the Woodlands is my favorite example. So, and when we go to, there's a couple ways to get here. For those of you that have not dealt much with MLS, I put the address of the home that I'm working with up here in the search bar, and it gave me a old MLS listing. I can go there, and then I can go to tax. That's one way to do it. Or I can go to public records and go to realist or matrix tax. I can do one or the other. And here, when I come through MLS, an old MLS listing, it takes me to matrix tax. If I want to go to realist tax, I can go right here. So what and there's a couple ways that I can find out if this house is in a mud. Going to other listings is not the way to get the mud information, you guys, because you could go to 3 listings and I bet you they're all 3 different. Because, yes, sir. You know, yin or yang. Some people, like Realist, I think has better clickable data. Like if I go to Realist here, for instance, oh, my battery's running low. That's fun. Yeah, different sources. And pretty much from a tax perspective, saying, other copies of it is, I don't know the exact acronym. I can't talk today, but I can tell you that this is where the MUD information is. So it's just a link. So, but we don't want to go by that. That's my point. So let's find out if this house is in a water district. One way is to click on where it says MUD information in Realist and you see the CWT. Then you can click on that. But here it has just the Woodlands Township. That's all it has. And I can promise you that's not my tax rate, okay? So you need to be careful about that. It'll only show one. It only has a link for one. So let's go back. And here's how you find out if something is in a statutory tax authority. Go down to where it breaks out the jurisdiction of the taxes, the different tax entities. So right here I have Montgomery County MUD number 47. That makes sense. That's a MUD. But also the Woodlands Township also is a taxing authority. And what does the Woodlands Township provide? Drainage and flood control. The township itself, drainage and flood control. So really I should have 2 water district forms. And you know, there's people here in Abbeyland, they love using this to get the business in a listing presentation. Because what if you're first and you're the first person that gets to, we always ask to be first. When someone says, well, I'm interviewing several agents, ask to be first, all right? So if that's possible. So when you talk to your client, talk to them about this. You know, most agents only think you need 1 water district form. However, here in the Woodlands, we really need 2. And this is why. Educate your client and tell them, when you talk to the other agents, ask them if they know about this. So it's a great selling tool that you know about this. So anyway, so everything that's blue is clickable. So now that I know I have 2 entities that I need to fill out 2 different MUD notices, I'm going to click on the MUD bond information here. And the MUD bond information is divided by county in alphabetical order. And then within that county is all of the entities in alphabetical order. So I work in the Woodlands and a lot. So I know it's like 5. I think it's, nope, I lied. Let's see. So I'm going to find Montgomery County. This is no fun. There's Harris. Harris is long. Those are still Harris County, aren't they? Where's my Montgomery County? East Montgomery County. Okay, there we go. So I find Montgomery County, and I'm going to go to number 47. And notice at the top of the page, guys, it says county, tax rate, tax year, bonds authorized, and bonds issued. All right. So the third, I'm going to need the tax year. My tax rate is the first number I see. This third number I see is the authorized, and then there's the issue. So I'm going to go down to number 47, and I'm going to see that my tax rate is 25 cents. So I go back to my form, and I'm going to put I put abbreviate MOCO number MUD number 47 in this blank right here. And then I'm going to invite you to read through this, but basically it's saying, as of this date, the tax rate levied by the district on the real property located in the district is blank. That's where I'm going to put my 25 cents, 0.25, on each $100 of assessed value. And then it says if the district has not yet levied taxes, the most recent projected tax rate as of this date is blank. I put NA on that because they have levied taxes. It's right there that they've sold bonds and issued bonds, okay? They've issued bonds and authorized bonds. So I'm going to put NA right here because we already have a tax rate. And then under authorized, I'm going to go back. And where it says bonds authorized, number 47, I'm going to put that number under authorized, and then the next number under issued. And if you get confused, I have this crazy idea. You can read it because it said, I know it's crazy. If you read through here, it says the total amount of bonds, excluding refunding bonds and any bonds of any portion of bonds issued that are payable solely from revenue received or expected to be received under a contract with a government entity approved by the voters, which have been or may have been at this date issued in blank. Right there. So authorized and issued. So, and if we are not selling, if we're not selling unimproved property, we're going to put NA under number 2. Now, here's my favorite part. Where to find an ETJ? Now, if you thought all of this was as clear as mud, now wait till you see the ETJ map. So I'm going to go, the best way to find your ETJ map is you can just put in here ETJ. And then it's one result. See, it's ETJ map right there. And then see this little pink folder right here? If you click on that, it'll save it to your favorites. But I've got my ETJ map, and this is the most fun you can ever have at work as an agent, because whoever designed this map has a real cruel sense of humor. Let me make it big. Somebody decided, okay, for entertainment purposes, I'm going to call these colors tan, pink, and green. If y'all want salmon and khaki, that's fine with me too. And so what is in, if you look at the corporate boundaries, so you've got the pink color, and then see the corporate squiggly lines around it right there? That's within the corporate boundaries of a city. So if you notice that it says that there's a line around and there's the corporate boundary of Houston. You see that? And then if you've got really, really good vision, let me find it for you. Hang on a second, and then we'll blow the map up. Still out here. And then you'll see it says in light colors, it'll say within the ETJ of whatever. I'm sorry, I'm making my map. My internet's not loving me. So see, it says right here, Willis, and then Willis ETJ. See right there? Willis ETJ. Then when you get Conroe and Houston ETJ kind of butt up against each other. So you got to be careful. So there's a Conroe ETJ. And then there's a squiggly line, and that's the difference between the Houston ETJ. And you'll see a Houston ETJ here. I can tell you that like Houston, Conroe are home rule municipalities. So we're going to go back again. Let's go back again. And go to our dot loop. Oops, sorry. So I'm going to say that this, if I'm in the Woodlands, I'm in Houston's ETJ. I'm just going to give y'all a thrill right here and tell you. If I'm in the Woodlands, I'm in Houston ETJ. Spring is not an incorporated city. So if you're in Spring, you're still in Houston or Houston's ETJ. All right. North of Houston, you got to be careful because you're going to butt on into the ETJ for Conroe and the ETJ for Houston. So if I'm in the Woodlands, I'm going to say, I'm going to check A because it says notice for districts located in whole or in part within the corporate boundaries of a municipality. That means I'm not within the corporate boundaries, but I am, look under the second choice, notice of district located in whole or part in the extraterritorial jurisdiction of one or more home rule municipalities. And that is where I am in the Woodlands. So I'm going to check that. People think the Woodlands is an actual municipality, but it's not. It's a township. In fact, that's if you live in the Woodlands, you've heard about the plan before 2050 to become a incorporated city so that we cannot be annexed by the city of Houston. That there is the Woodlands Township has an agreement with the city of Houston that we are free from annexation up until this 2050. And there's quite a political conversation going on in the Woodlands about that. So in this case, I'm going to check the second one because I'm within that ETJ. And then down below, I'm going to use B, that I'm going to say the district is wholly, not notice the district, not my address, the district is whole or in part in the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city of Houston is what I'm going to put there, okay? If this property was out in Never Land and it was not in an ETJ, it was not in the corporate boundaries of a municipality, it's just rural property, then I could choose this third choice here. But that's not a lot in our immediate area. There's not a lot of property. Be sure to put the legal description right here. Copy the legal description, and the legal description again is found on your tax roll. Just copy and paste it. And a most common mistake people make is remember that the tax year that we're talking about. So for MUD number 47, it's 2019. So I'm going to go down and put 2019 down here. Okay. Now I need to fill out another form for the township. I'm going to do the exact same thing, but I'm going to use the tax information for the township. So when I go to my listing appointment in the Woodlands, I'm going to have 2 of these ready to go. And by the way, you're going to get a call from an agent, whoever, if they're not an Abbey agent, you're going to get a call going, why do you have 2 MUD notices? You're going to get some pushback because most people don't know they need to do that. Shame on them. They should be Abbey agents. So, whoops, I clicked too fast. So to do this again, I can either go through here in Montgomery County. There's another, acid check for you. Go through Montgomery County and go down alphabetically and see the Woodlands Township right here. I don't know why it's listed twice. I'm trying to see the difference. No. No. Yeah, just the Woodlands Township. Same number, same everything. Some clerk somewhere's in trouble. But anyway, so you would need to do the same thing for the Woodlands Township. It's still in the Houston ETJ, still the same legal description and everything. But you need to add the tax information for the township. If those of you that work in Harris County, Most of Harris County is in Harris County Flood Control District, and then it could also have a MUD or a PUD. So in the city of Houston, you see more PUDs listed than MUDs. So they're not always called the MUD, like the township's not called the MUD. But so questions about that? About why you do it? Okay. Other than the eye chart that I showed you? My answer in here is Lisa. No. She gets faded, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Jonathan. Yes, when I got it afterwards, after I ate a little. Yes. We'll try to repeat questions. Sorry. Okay, so we got that far. We're going to hurry through the rest of these. So let's go back. Now, the next form I want to talk about, where's my little thing? The next form I want to talk about is, although the HOA is a selling agent or buyer's agent's document, I pre-fill that out as a listing agent and have my client sign it. I need to have an HOA conversation with my client. And what I do is I fill this out, and I fill it out to my client's benefit. And pardon me? Well, it should be in your listing agent documents when you pull them down, the HOA. So when you pull listing agent documents, but if not, you can go to Trek template and pull it. So let's talk about the HOA addendum. First of all, be very careful with HOAs. HOAs, these documents were created when HOAs were very simple. They had an annual fee, they had a transfer fee, end of story. Now, newer developments, they have all kinds of fun fees. They have, whoops, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm all lit up here. Just a second. So this is the addendum for property subject to a mandatory membership. It should come down in your template, but if not, you can go to the Trek templates and pull it. So you'll want to make sure you know the HOA's name and phone number. Do not rely on other people's listings. They could be wrong. If you pull from another listing, the phone number and the contact information, call the HOA and talk to them and make sure you've got the right number and the right community and the right people. So under the subdivision information, and subdivision information means a copy of the restrictions applying to the subdivision, bylaws and associations, and or a resale certificate. Now, there are two reasons we get a resale certificate. One is the buyer wants it. Two is the title company requires it, and most of the time the title company and lender will require it, okay? So let's look at our choices and then let's talk about them. Under choice 1, it says within however many days after the effective date of the contract, the seller shall obtain, pay for, and deliver the subdivision information to the buyer. So I, as the seller, I'm going to pay for a resale certificate, and if there's a charge to get the covenants, which are usually online, so you can just pull them offline. I am going to, as the seller, pay for that. Well, that sounds nice of me, doesn't it? So, but let's read on. If seller delivers the subdivision information, the buyer may terminate the contract within 3 days after the buyer receives the subdivision information. Isn't that convenient? Or prior to closing, whichever occurs first. And the earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. Be very careful as a seller or listing agent that you do not provide a second option period for your buyer. And in this case, you would be doing that because rarely, if ever, is there a subdivision that will, HOA that will provide a HOA information or resale certificate in less than 10 days. So think about this. If it takes them 10 days to provide it, and then the buyer has 3 more days to terminate. It doesn't say terminate because they didn't like the HOA. There's no reason, just terminate. They can just terminate just because they want to. So you would be giving your buyer an additional opportunity to terminate and get their earnest money back. I don't do that. I don't do either of these because number 2 is that within so many days, the same 10-day issue is going to happen. The buyer is going to obtain it. So that sounds smart. You go get it, Mr. Buyer, and you pay for it if you want it. So bad. But again, however long it takes to get that information, plus 3 days, they can terminate. So I don't like either one of those choices. They're not my choice. Under 3, it says the buyer has received and approved the subdivision information before signing the contract. The buyer does or does not require an updated resale certificate. So this is if you, Mr. Seller, decided to, I'm going to be ready for this. I'm going to go get the resale certificate and pay for it. I'm going to have it for them. The only reason that's a bad idea is the title company is going to require an updated resale certificate. So let's say we provided a resale certificate. It took us 30 days to close, and maybe the house is on the market for another 15 days. That means that 45 days have gone by, and the title company and lender are going to require an updated resale certificate. So basically, I call number 3 is you just wasted your money or somebody's money. I like to choose number 4, and you're going to find that's most commonly chosen. But when you choose number 4, title is still going to require that resale certificate. This is saying the buyer doesn't care. It doesn't say title doesn't care. So we need to be prepared for that. It even says that in big, bold language. The title company or its agent is authorized to act on behalf of all the parties to obtain the subdivision information. So it says right there the title company is going to request it. So now we need to figure out who's going to pay for what. So let's go to C, and it says fees and deposits for reserves, except as provided by paragraphs A and D. So except for, what's here, it says buyers shall pay any and all association fees, deposits, reserves, and other charges associated with the transfer of property not to exceed blank. Be a good agent for your seller. Make sure you understand all of the fees associated with buying a property in that HOA. And I'll tell you why, is that most newer, and when I say newer, I say developed after 2000, 2005. Most newer subdivisions roll the cost of development into HOA fees by charging buyers things like capitalization fees, owner fee, new owner fees. They have all kinds of fun names for them. And some of them are like, well, Woodson's Reserve, the biggest one I've dealt with was $1,800. So make sure you know. And by the way, HOAs don't like to advertise this, right? They don't like to tell people. And your seller's not going to know because, especially if they bought the house from the builder, many cases, well, first of all, when you deal with the builder, you don't know what all those charges are anyway. And then they say, oh, we paid those for you, by the way. Oh, you have these charges, but we've got a promotion going. We paid those for you. So more than likely, the seller had no knowledge of that fee when they purchased the property, and they're not usually advertised by and large. So you really need to call the HOA and ask them, do you have a capitalization fees or any other fees that are associated with purchasing a house in this subdivision? Specifically ask them that. And most of them have it, pick line B or whatever, line 2 for real estate agents. So they, it can be difficult to find this information, but you need to find it. In some cases, buyers and sellers will agree to split those fees. In some cases, the buyer wants to pass them off to the seller. I mean, the buyer wants the seller to, this is a negotiable form, I guess my point is. I try to have reasonably put any fees associated with purchasing the house, I confirm them, and I put that in this blank. So if it costs $1,000, I put $1,000. You're going to find with people that have been in this industry for a while, you'll see $250 over and over again, because that was normal before all these new development fees happened. That was very normal, a $250 transfer fee. But now we have all these fees. I mean, I almost want to say hidden costs. And for some buyers to hit them with, $1,500, $2,000 extra at closing could be a deal killer. So that's why it's so important, even though this is a buyer's agent's document, you as a listing agent, you need to know this. And 99 times out of 100, especially in this market, if I fill this out, have my seller sign it, the buyer's agent's probably going to have her buyer sign it and send it. So every once in a while, they will present you with one that is altered, because tomorrow when we talk about being a buyer's agent, I'm going to have a different conversation with you, right? If you're representing a buyer. But today you're representing a seller, and you need to protect them from having additional costs when they sell their home. And this is how you do it. Also under D, now the seller authorized the association to release and provide the subdivision information, which is the resale certificate, and any updated resale certificate if requested by the buyer or the title company or any broker in the sale. If buyer does not require the subdivision information or an updated resale certificate, and the title company requires information from the association, such as the status of dues, especially, that's what they want to make sure. The resale certificate tells the title company there's no fees associated, that unpaid fees. And it also tells, confirms with the buyer what the actual annual fee is. I put there, I check the buyer should pay, because what they're doing, they are paying for here the buyer or seller shall pay the title company the cost of obtaining the information. So C was additional fees like transfer fees and capitalization fees. D is the cost, the HOA charges to get the information. And some of them charge about $450. My favorite one, it was $450 to get this certificate. I was like, is it gold plated? I mean, is it framed? What is it? And then, or something. And then if you wanted it in less than 10 days, if you wanted it rushed, it was $750. So, and someone gives their credit card. This is not a closing fees. They usually call a number and give their credit card to get this information. Okay. So we need to know what that costs also. Know your fees. I have them sign it. Well, I have them sign it at the our initial meeting at our listing. In my perfect world that I made up, when everything happens exactly like I want it to happen, I would either leave that listing appointment with all my docs signed, or they would say, can you send those to me electronically? And I would send them to them electronically, and they sign them right there. That would be my happiest place. I can always, and sometimes I tell them if I haven't figured out all the fees yet, and I have a number in there, I explain these fees to my seller, and I'll tell them, you know what, the HOA hasn't confirmed. This is what I think I know. We're going to go ahead and sign this, and then if we have to sign another one and replace it, we will. So that's so, yeah, that's so I can have it signed. But I'm going to add this to my MLS documents. So I want to move on so we can get you out of here. So seller's disclosures. Everyone, there are only a few cases in the state of Texas where you don't need a seller's disclosure. And I call these the 4 Ds. And you remember them by debt, divorce, and death and dwelling. And so under debt means that the sale is a result of a foreclosure. The bank owns the house. They don't know anything about the house. They don't have to have a disclosure. or bankruptcy court has it. They don't have to provide a disclosure. In the case of a divorce, husband selling to wife, wife selling to their immediate child that lived in the house. Everyone has already coexisted in this house. They don't need a disclosure. If it's part of probate or will, they don't need a disclosure. And if it's a new build or the value of the property is less than 5% of the property value, they don't need a disclosure. The TREC disclosure is the preferred disclosure. When you go to Legal 1 and 2, you'll learn that we prefer this disclosure, and I'll tell you why. It's asking for less information from the seller. There are less opportunities for us to have a lawsuit. That's really what it boils down to. There is a TAR disclosure that looks a lot more comprehensive. I would say as a listing agent, I like the TREC version. As a buyer's agent, I like the TAR version. So, but we use this version. We do not fill this out for our clients. I sit with my clients many times and help them answer questions for them. You know, you'll get a lot of people going, what's LP gas? No, I don't know what that is. I don't even know if I have that. I will tell you that I do help them. I go out to the flood district. The flood map can be accessed through FEMA, or it is on, it's a click away on any MLS listing. So if I go back to my MLS listing, I see the flood map right here. And I can tell them if they're in a flood zone, okay? So I can help them answer and show them the answer to these questions here. And show them where to get that information. And if they're in an AE zone or anything, it explains that to them what that is. Other than that, I need for them to fill in every single blank. There are only 3 answers. I mean, most of these, it's yes, no, and unknown. And unknown is a viable answer. If that's the answer and they don't know, that's the answer. All right. You don't have to worry about answering it for them. Under seller's exclusions, remember we had this chat that I asked I show them the seller's exclusions. I help my clients with this. Like, I have a client that we're going on the market in the next week or so. She has a beautiful antique chandelier in her bedroom. I just had her replace it with a regular cheap ceiling fan from Home Depot. And let's not exclude it. Let's just pack it up today. So I try to get rid of those kinds of really, especially if they really like, I mean, sorry, that chandelier made the room. It was gorgeous. You know, she had this great antique bed and the beautiful chandelier. It's gorgeous. We would be having a negotiation with someone over that chandelier. So we just took it out and put a fan up there. So that, but if it's still there, we need to exclude it. Need to talk to people. If they're taking the draperies and rods, they need to fix the hole where it was. So where if they're taking something away, they have to fix where it was. You can't leave the gaping hole where the TV mount used to be. And I have them sign it even if they have no exclusions. I want them to see it. I want to protect myself and not have any upses. And then the next thing I want to talk about is lead-based paint addendum. You guys, people read this. We get this wrong so many times. If you are the listing agent and you have a house 1978 or before, then your client would need to fill this out. Please do not pre-select it for your seller, but the seller will choose 1A or B and 2, or they will choose 1A or 1B and choose 2A or 2B. Does that make sense? And then they sign it, and so do you. If they have had any reports, I had a client that just out of curiosity got a lead-based paint report. We have to post it. We have a report, we have to post it. And by the way, if you know, if you have a house that's built before 1978, really technically it probably has some, it's almost impossible to get all traces of lead out of a older home. A lot of it's built into the wall. And so there are some levels of lead that is acceptable. When you read those reports, the state has a level that's acceptable. And it's the issue is if it's beyond the acceptable level. But you sign it and your client signs it, and this goes in MLS. Have it available before you list. And then the last one that we need to talk about is a TILA. Well, not dead last, but so this is simply your client's authorization that you are going to see, and it says, I hereby authorize you to disclose and furnish a copy of any and all loan estimates, closing disclosures, or other settlement statements. So the HUD that you see at the end, that's what they're giving you permission to see. This is uploaded with your CDA to the title company. So you'll need to have your client sign it. And then we don't have a disclosure of relationship with residential service company anymore. For those of you that have done a transaction with us, we basically don't have a relationship with a residential service company because we've decided that it really is against RESPA rules for us to have that relationship and to receive payment from them. So we no longer do. I'll also tell you that one of the things I ask at a listing appointment is I ask, do you have a survey? And commonly you're gonna die, but the answer is, I don't know. That's the answer most of the time. So here's how I deal with that. I'll tell them that it will probably be in the paperwork that you got when you bought the house. You know, that's where it is. Do you have that paperwork, that big giant packet they gave you when you bought the house? If they have a survey, I give them the T47 as homework. I fill everything out. So what I do for them is if they have a survey, I fill everything out up here, the date, their names, their address, the description of the property, and the county that the property is in. If they are here in Texas, because I've had people have to do this out of state, then I would put state of Texas. The other thing I do for them on this form before I give it to them is this date that goes in number 4, that is the date they purchased the house, and commonly they don't know that. And I can get that information off of their realist tax. So I can get that information really off of Matrix. So if we go down to the 360 history, you can go all the way down, and then you can see when that, well, that's not, you can see when that person purchased that house. So that's another good thing about Matrix taxes down there at the end. So you can see when the person purchased the house, and I put that in there for them because commonly they don't remember what date they purchased the house. And then I tell them, I don't do it for them, but I tell them, if you've not made any changes to the property, like built a pool since this survey, then the answer here is none. And you'll get a lot of them back that don't say none. So I make a point of telling them that. I give it to them as homework and ask them as soon as convenient, they can go and sign this in front of a notary. And then I upload that into MLS. And I explain it to them that technically this document is not due until we get a contract, but usually what happens is it's a very short period of time that we have, like 2 or 3 days. So to make it most convenient for you, let's get it done now and show everyone that we have it. And so I give that to them at the listing appointment. And when we talk tomorrow about contracts, you need to be very careful that you have that, because if you only present a survey with within the prescribed time of a contract, and you don't present the T47, your seller is out of contract, and it gives your buyer another opportunity to get out of the contract. So that's why let's get rid of all these little loopholes and tighten up our contracts. And this is one way we do it. And I'm done. The end. Love, Sheryl. Those are the documents that we have that we've scheduled that we should talk about today. However, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want to go back and cover? We've covered and you want to go back and cover, or we haven't covered? Questions you have about this process? Yes, there is a checklist. That's a good question. The question was, is there a checklist that we can use? And yes, if you go down in any template, seller's transaction checklist right here. I just caution you that there's no way that Abbey Realty can figure out everything possible that you're going to need. So this is most probable, and you know, anything else would be contract driven, situationally driven. And of course, if your client signed it, you need it. So, any other questions? Since this is a CE class, I need to get from you before you leave, those of you in the room, a classroom evaluation, course evaluation. Oh, do you have them back there? Oh, yay. Well, if you could fill one out and put it back there on your way out the door, and then slowly walk toward the back of the room, and that's it. We got finished early. Don't tell anyone. You guys online, you are free to leave the building or the call. Thank you so very much for joining. That's a long time to listen to someone talk. I always feel sorry for you guys. Talk to you later. Thanks so much, guys. And tomorrow we're going to be buyer's agents. Well, I can tell you that I think these are the most commonly used. I mean, think about it. You always have to have a listing agreement. You always have to have an IABS. Okay. So, were you in .lit class the other day? Okay, good. So I didn't want to start in the middle of my answer and you not know. So, well, unfortunately, let's go to templates and talk about this for a second. So if you go to templates, and you really kind of, you know, it is an Easter egg hunt. Yeah, it's an Easter egg hunt. I'll be honest with you. I find personally that most of the time, most of what I'm looking for can be found in Trek. And I can, and if you, and I don't, some people remember form numbers. Oh, that's a Trek, you know, a TAR 1903 or something. I don't know that. And usually, in a lot of cases, if TAR has it, Trek has an evil twin sister of it. So I usually start with Trek. There are a few documents that are, you know, Houston based, and you're just gonna get used to it as you go. But, oh yeah, I remember that's a Trek document. But most of the time, I start with Trek. That helps a little bit. And then if there's something that you're always just looking, and my favorite grouping is commonly used extra documents. But if there's something that you're always looking for and you can't find it, I would make a personal folder in templates and drag them up there. You could do that. Yeah, you can make a personal folder. You could add in templates, you can add a folder and make it, you know, call it whatever you want, stuff I can't find, and throw whatever you want in there. But I think you're going to find that most of your documents are in templates, and when you're looking for something over and over again, it gets intuitive, and when you start typing, it just comes up. Okay, guys, I'm gonna close down my online